Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. I'm Niresh Eliathambi. Workers' rights are always of paramount importance, especially in tough economic times like these. And to discuss this and other issues, I have with me tonight Swasthika Arulingam, President of the United Federation of Labour, and Barath Arullsamy, Vice President of the Ceylon Workers' Congress. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Thank you, Niresh, for having us.
Thank you for having.
So, Swasthika, let me start with you for the first question. What is the job situation in this country? We see various statistics which come out from official sources saying that the unemployment rate is not so bad. But do we see jobs being created? We don't see a lot of new factories starting up. We seem to see more factories closing down rather than starting. So what is the job situation with regard to the general population?
I think to answer that question, I want to perhaps rethink what we have been we have certain things are being instilled in us. For instance, one of the recent bills which are going to be passed is the Economic Transformation Bill. And the rationale for that bill is somehow magically that bill is going to bring investments to the country. That is the argument which is being put forward. But when we speak about jobs, immediately we connect that to investments, and then we connect that to the facts that the factories are closing down. And then we also hear this argument that factories which should have come to Sri Lanka, are now moving to Bangladesh and various other places and so on. And somehow that argument gets connected to wages, because when we raise this question of wages, immediately the argument is no, factories are closing down and moving out, so therefore we need to have low wages. So the question which I want to ask when we speak about the issue of jobs is that yes, we need investments. Unions want investments. We want employment to thrive in this country. But what is the nature of employment, or what is the kind of investments we want to have in this country? And I think that is where we have to interrogate and ask the question, if we want investments which are going to bring in low paid jobs, like for instance the plantation, for 200 years we are having plantations with low paid jobs. If that is the type of investments we want to continue to acquire into the country, then unions have a serious problem. Because we want investments. Why do we want investments in this country? We want investment in this country because we want part of the capital to remain inside the country. And how does the capital remain inside the country? One of the ways capital remains inside the country is through wages. So unless we talk about wages and unless we talk about living wage, and for people to be able to have a job and live a proper life, then I don't think that investment is a good investment, and we don't need that kind of investment in the country, because we have already experimented with that kind of investment for the last 70 years. So that's one issue. The second issue which I always speak about when we speak about jobs is that we have a constitution, and whether I agree with it or another person agrees with it, the constitution says we are a democratic socialist republic. Now those words are not put there for decoration. The word socialist is put there because our country, the ethos of our country is that we are not only talking about a market economy, we are also talking about redistribution of wealth. What the government is today trying to do is trying to attract investments, which talks about capital concentration in a few people, where investors are allowed to come into the country, they are allowed to amass profits, and they are allowed to take away that profits while keeping wages at a depressed level. For instance, take for example the minimum wage of this country. What is the minimum wage of this country? Is 16,000 rupees. In 2029, union said increase the minimum wage of the country to 26,000 rupees. Employers did not agree to that. And today when we look at a household income, Census and Statistics is telling us a household income should be approximately 103,500. And the earning unit is 1.8. So what are unions saying? Divide the 103,500 by 1.8 and it comes to around 57,500. So minimum wage should at least be around 57,500. But the government is not talking about it. The Labour Minister is coming and now saying he wants to increase the minimum wage to 21,000. Who can live in this country for 21,000? So I want to perhaps turn the question upside down and also raise the question. We definitely want investments in this country. We do not want factories to move out. But there is no empirical data to show that factories are leaving this country because wages are high. There is no data to have a correlation between wages and factories moving out. The reason why investments are moving out of this country is because we don't have proper procedures. When an investment comes into this country, we don't know how to deal with that investments. Then we have to deal with all these commissions and so on. So that problem is definitely there. But there is no correlation between wages and investments. So therefore, I kindly ask people in power to not scapegoat workers and unions for asking for a decent living wage for people to live in this country.
Now, Barath, when it comes to wages, the plantations are center stage right now over the issue of the 1,700 rupee wage. Could you tell us what's going on at this point? Because there's so much, it's a bit of a tug of war, isn't it? So much going on. What's the current situation?
Thank you, Mr. Naresh, for having us here. First and foremost, there is nothing to hide or nothing to argue right now by the employers, because there is a fair stage was given to everyone to raise their point, and also we had invited by informal discussion, formal discussion through wages board to come up with a working wage model. But unfortunately, they didn't never show up. So it is, as I told you earlier also, on the context of law, we have resorted the wages board, then the wage commission, and through the labor minister, we have gazetted this wage hike. So, and also they they went before the court to get an injunction, and the court was very fair enough to take a decision to quash their plea for a interim injunction. So on that ground, I would say now they all must understand, as Swasthika also referred that, every 2 years the plantation workers they demand for a wage hike, not because of a practice or something, a practical difficulty, because the cost of living is going up and inflation is going up. So when you compare 2019 to 2024, the peak on the inflation and cost of living is much more higher. So we initially requested a reasonable wage hike, but unfortunately no one came forward with a working plan. Instead, they just proposed an incentive hike, which is not going to help anyone anytime. So we are also, as Ceylon Workers Congress, as a union, is open for productivity. We always wanted a productivity-based economy, but it is not on the cost of the rights and welfare of our worker. That is, we are very keen. So when this demand for a wage hike, a business owner or a company or an entity, they should design to provide this wage hike accordingly. So they should come up with their business model, rather coming in at the last moment. They can't come and cry that the market is down, the tea prices are low, the productivity is low. So this is anticipated more than a year, where you should design your business model. So without doing that, putting the burden on the worker or the union or the government, it is not acceptable. We also wanted investment or private companies to strive, and also they should prosper, but we also wanted to know they also should understand the major important element in this entire industry is the human capital. So by not addressing the human capital need, how the industry will survive? So that is the major question. So Now recently I had a program through the Plantation Human Development Trust through my organization. So I showcased the real statistics of the workforce in the labor industry, the plantation industry, where the birth rate of the workforce is also less, and the migration of the workforce is also less, and in like 5 to 10 years there won't be any workers to work in the tea plantations, not especially in the plantation industry. So it is high time we all must come up with a productive plan to incorporate a method. Mr. Naresh, the Sri Lankan economy is a market driven economy. There are two economies in the world, where how North Korea, the state controlled economy, and the rest is the market oriented economy. So if you go through despite Russian war, the Russian economy is like thriving not because of anything else, the market owned economy, that is. So the market decide what to do. So similarly India, similarly some European countries. So Sri Lanka, adhering to that kind of a market based economy, it is very important to know our competitors. Now, especially in tea industry, Kenya is a big competitor, India is a big competitor, China is a big competitor, even Bangladesh, they are a production in competition. So how we are going to systematically structure our business model, especially in the plantation sector, and per se like for any industry here, we have to have a developed plan. So if we are going for a full-fledged one side oriented understanding, that will be affecting the entire industry. So I always emphasize, when you talk on the capitalism part, you should always think about conscious capitalism. So conscious capitalism is not only empowering the shareholder of the company, but also to empower the stakeholder of the company. So whether it's a worker or the market or whatever, like say I can give a example. There are some, even in Sri Lanka or in India, there are some entities, they always like say if there is a dairy based company, they empower the dairy farmers to engage in value addition or production or maintenance. They give soft loans, they help to provide cattle sheds. So the milk production will come to that company on a stakeholder partnership or empowering the stakeholder. So similarly in the tea plantation, they may say we are giving everything, right? But it is not like that. It is when you empower, and as I told you, more than 60% of drop in workforce in the plantation sector. Younger generation is not coming for the plantation work. So what as an employer, and it is the responsibility of the trade union also to look into that. So that is what we are looking into, the productive based model. So I would say we have taken a decision, the government has supported us, and we have gone according to the law, and also we Ceylon Workers Congress being one of the strongest alliance of the government, we made sure His Excellency the President and also the Labour Minister and the Labour Ministry, according to the frame of legal framework, we have delivered the wage hike. So Alcadua Plantation has given 1,700. I believe, and I strongly believe that all the other plantation companies also provide the wage hike. They have to adjust their business model accordingly.
Is there a deadline by which the 1,700 has to be implemented?
No, according to the Gazette notification, on 21st instead last month, this 1,700 is applicable. So when I spoke to the Labour Ministry and some colleagues, they said the time frame is very less, so that they will pay from the June month salary on July 10th. The salary date is on 10th. So I strongly believe everyone will adhere to that.
Now, Swasthika, let's look at the role of wages boards, which are a rather strange entity, because wages boards do control the minimum wage of many industries, but we don't hear a lot about them publicly. and they seem to come out with minimum wages which are far too low for a family to survive. What is the process? What's the role, and why are the wages board's stipulations so low?
Wages board is kind of like a body which has representation from the government, from the companies, as well as from the unions. So whenever there is a minimum wage discussion, there is always a what I would say a debate between these three stakeholders. And as my fellow trade unionists were saying here, basically the unions would of course demand for a living wage. I mean, that is our job, to ensure that our workers get living wage, and then the employers would come and say, they are not making profits and so on. That is usually what happens. So between the tussle, we are hoping that the government would intervene and ensure that a living wage is paid to the worker, because the government, this is what I mentioned in the start also, investments also means decent wages. But over time, what has been happening is that due to various lobbies, the government has been, apart from what has happened, and I am not blind to the fact that this happened very near the elections, but anyway, apart from very rare cases like that, particularly when it comes to plantation workers, I mean, much as the government has intervened and now given 1,700, I can't deny the fact that the workers have struggled for decades to actually come to this point. So I don't want to take that struggle away from the workers. So the government must intervene on behalf of the weaker section of society, which is the workers. But unfortunately, more often than not, the state party bends towards the employers, because they get convinced by the argument that, if you increase wages, we are going to go into a loss, just like what the plantation companies are doing now. They will make loss and then they will leave the country, then they will go to another country and so on. And that argument, as ridiculous as it sounds, it has a lot of sway when it comes to people in the state power. So I think that is why we have had very low minimum wages, which is really bad. As I was saying, our minimum wage is still 16,000 rupees. I mean, minimum wage is supposed to be the basic wage on which a person can live, and our country has 16,000 rupees in 2024. And the labour minister is coming and saying, I'm going to increase it to 20. Who can live in 21,000 when their own numbers say we should at least pay 57,500? So that is the reason why wages board end up with low wages and so on. I think one of the proposals which unions have come forward is maybe we should have a national wage commission, where the government has a lot of power to weigh in and ensure that workers get proper wages. But of course the government has to be worker friendly. If your government is more friendly towards businesses, and also businesses which exploit workers, like for instance the plantation companies, then we are also going to have low minimum wages. So I think that is where the debate comes in.
Now, I'm a little puzzled by the wages boards, because in many modern countries, developed nations like the United States, there is one minimum wage. It may vary, I think, from state to state, but it doesn't matter who you are, which trade or industry you're in. The minimum wage is supposed to be a wage that will allow you to survive, to live. But in Sri Lanka, we have different scales coming from the wages board for different industries. What's the rationale behind that?
I think this is what I believe, right? I think the rationale behind that was some industries, like for instance export sectors, make more profit than for instance local industries. So therefore you need to have higher wages in those sectors than, but that is keeping, not depressing beyond a certain point. I think that is the initial rationale for having different wages board and so on. But I do agree with you that despite, even though we may need to have wages board, for instance export sector as opposed to local industries and so on, there has to be a national minimum wage which is applicable across the board, and that national minimum wage has to be a living wage. A person should be able to live with that money, and that concept is still not there in Sri Lanka, which I think is a problem.
Now, Barath, you spoke of the human capital and the need for companies to invest in this. This is of course true, I think, in every industry. especially because many young people are leaving right now. They can't find good jobs or they can't find jobs at all, and they are migrating out of the country, whether temporarily to the Middle East or permanently to Canada or Australia or wherever. Tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on how companies can convince young people to stay. I mean, of course, companies can't say that the country is a wonderful place and they shouldn't leave. But what can be done on the part of a company?
Ramesh, we have to see it in a macro level and micro level. On macro level, the policy. See, our country after 1948, up until 1948, it is a well-developed country. Most of the other countries, including China, they were looking up to us like how a developing economy we were. But unfortunately, due to these populist policy decisions, cutting down taxes, reducing pricing, let go of debts. So this has led to a serious traction between the development and also social integrity. So once we do free handouts, this has made a community or a people as a large, they have to be a dependent economy, a class of people who always depend on something. So their striving levels to their economy or their finances is much more minimal. So what I see in the present government, yes, it is very difficult for us, taking some unpopular decisions. But fortunately or unfortunately, we have to go through these hurdles. So I went through the recent economic bill and also the corruption bill, so the corruption law, and the system is taking place where another Aragalaya should not happen, where the youngsters of the country should not come to the road for a reform or a system change. So I observe personally that there is a proper way of mechanism is being developed. This is where the responsibility lies on a micro level, where when you take these decisions or policies being made, you should make a policy maker which a relevant capacity or knowledge to make such policies. If you take the same populist or a kind of a gratitude-based political understanding, then we will suffer the same problem in another 10-20 years. So first and foremost, the policy decisions, then come to the administrative and monitoring mechanism. So we always see there is a common argument like state-owned enterprises and governance and also administration. Now this most of the companies, they also, now if you see the entire understanding of a election promises or kind of economic policies or fiscal policies, mostly based on a kind of 100 business companies or 10 business families. So it shouldn't be like that. So what I would suggest, if for a company to invest on human capital, for a company to develop their human capital with the competitive market, now this AI is developing and modern technologies are coming in. Instead of labor, there are machineries are introduced. So in this modern technological era, it is very important the consciousness and the human capital should be empowered by this policy, and also, as I told you earlier, a business mechanism. Now, as I told you, when we refer to the our own plantation industry, we have requested the Employer Federation of Ceylon since 2019 to come up with a uniform model for product activity. We also know this daily wage model or this regimental method of working is outdated. But if there is no uniform model in the industry to ensure the sustainability of the industry and also to encourage youngsters to come in. Now, see, for when you go to the plantation sector, Mr. Naresh, the younger generation is not like so much for like going and working under someone on a traditional methodology. They wanted to be an independent person who they are very much confident they can strive. They can hardly work and take the maximum out of that, but the dignity should be given. So I feel that dignity component along with the traditional, this regimental work methodology should be changed for us, for the plantation companies or the state-owned plantation corporation to pull in younger generation people to come and work in the estate. So that is what we were proposing, to come up with a model where we become tea partners instead of tea workers. So like the companies may argue on the other side, say we have this outgrower model, one is earning 40,000, 50,000 rupees. So where is the job guarantee? So the job security is ensured. Whether the job security is ensured, can you ensure that there is no exploitation? Can you ensure the statutory mechanisms are followed? So those are the questions we have. So that is what we are also in discussion now. I spoke to the country director of ILO. So I proposed our Honorable Minister Jeevan Thondaman, our General Secretary, wanted to have an inclusive model in the transformation world on the working economy. And also I remember our party president Senthil Thondaman, when he came to this show, he also echoed that thought. So why we want this system change in the industry, to attract people into the system or the industry, to to make a sustainability in this industry. So coming back to your question, the companies need to introduce new business models to attract more youngsters to come into the industry, and also similarly parallelly the government also should introduce policy framework which can support not only regulators but also the businesses to strive and also ensure the rights and welfare of the workers.
I just don't agree with many things Barath said. For instance, what he said about the fact that this government is trying to create an economic structure which is trying to stabilize the economy. And for instance, I have gone through the economic transformation bill page to page. And if you look at the first two, the clause 3 and 4 of the bill, they have brought into the bill IMF targets, which even IMF does not know how to explain. So how is the government just bringing in, copying and pasting it from March 2023 IMF review without even asking the question, why are we being set these targets? And then if you look at the rest of the bill, that has nothing to do with the IMF targets. It's about creating economic zones and then giving private companies complete outright purchase of land, of our land, of the land of our people, and creating a country into an entire dividing and selling off a country into economic zones. So what the government could not do through MCC is now the government is doing through an economic transformation bill, and very proudly so also. So I don't, and then of course, I don't even want to talk about the online safety bill which was passed, which was a circus. Then the ATA which the government is bringing in. Then the Bureau of Rehabilitation bill which the government has brought in, which is basically going to create forced labor camps. So I don't think this government has, the IMF is giving certain directions. IMF will do what the IMF do. IMF is not the godfather of this country or anything. So they have given some money and they want the money back. They are representing the interest of the creditors. So I don't think this government, that's my first disagreement with Barath. And my second disagreement is that I don't think this country went into a crisis which what a lot of neoliberals call free handouts. Now, when we say free handouts, for instance, what they mean is electricity subsidy. If a person is earning 16,000, I'm talking about minimum wage, right? If a person is earning 16,000 rupees, what is wrong with subsidizing that house for electricity so that child can study, the family can put on the light, the child can go to school? What's wrong with subsidizing that electricity? What happened was we were subsidizing people who can pay. That was the problem. Not about giving handouts to people who were below poverty line or close to poverty line. We did not have a 98% literacy rate. That did not just fall from the air. We had a policy of free education. And now this government is dismantling it through the economic policy. They are bringing in health tourism without properly understanding that in hospitals we don't even have proper accident and emergency wards which are functioning. Look at Facebook and look at what doctors are saying on this. So I completely disagree with the argument that free handouts, particularly for, I don't even call it free, right? Workers, plantation workers, free trade zone workers, manufacturing workers, it is because of them that this country's economy has run since independence. So if we are going to give them anything free, I am perfectly fine with that, because it is on their labor. And us paying starvation wages, how long did it take the government to give 1,000 rupees to workers? I mean, before that, what were they paying? So workers till today, export sector workers to date live in line houses. So if you are going to give certain free things, I don't actually have a problem with that. Our country went into an economic crisis because we started borrowing from the international sovereign markets on interest rates which we were unable to comply with. That is problem number one. And the problem number two is, in a country like ours which is developing, even in United States, when they were trying to bring their country's economy from the World War II crisis, during that time, even the European states were having financial controls. That is basics. When you talk about the Asian tigers, how did they develop? They developed by having financial controls. It is much later that they lifted the financial controls. But our government, in a state of crisis, when we have just gone through bankruptcy, the economic transformation bill is saying lift all capital restrictions. So then, like, I don't understand what kind of economy we are trying to build when the government will have no idea about how much money is going to come into the country and how much money is going to go out. And if that is the model which we are going to build, and if we are going to bring in IMF targets without even asking a simple question, are these targets actually going to get us out of? I'll give you an example. In the economic transformation bill, they say the debt to GDP ratio should be 95%. Have we asked the question, if you maintain a debt to GDP of 95%, does that mean our country is going to come out of the crisis? Is that even a significant economic indicator to say that we will come out of the crisis? No one is asking these questions. We are just, if the IMF says this should be the debt to GDP, we are just putting it into law. We are binding ourselves in our law. So just to say that people coming out to the streets, chasing away one of the worst presidents in this country is one of the best things which could have happened to the country. That is the first time the younger generation, since the 1980s general strike, that is the first time our younger generation have decided enough is enough. We have the power to change the status quo if we want. If we come in millions, we would change the status quo. And I think people in power should remember that, and they should be afraid of the people. And if we are just going to rely on electoral cycles and people come to power and then they do whatever they want, I think people have said we are not going to be happy with that status quo. So I just wanted to very strongly disagree on those two factors. And I don't think the country is going to, many economists are saying we are going to go into a second default. And I think that is something which we should take seriously.
Now, Swasthika.
So, Naresh,
yes.
Can I comment on
Certainly,
that?
Yes.
So, Naresh, in light of a disagreement, see, our younger generation in Aragalaya.
It's better to have a disagreement than to have a bankruptcy.
No, let me. Yeah, exactly.
We are going to go to that.
Yeah, no. I'll explain. See, our younger generation in Aragalaya or post Aragalaya, it is not. They didn't come down to roads just to have a procession or a kind of a kick off the president or the government. They wanted to have a systemized manner in which these economic policies or the decisions or even the constitution should be changed or amended or introduced in a new way. This reform should be happen in a systematic manner. We can't go to the streets every day. So that's what I was emphasizing, the fact that the current government or the current president is I'll refer to the quote of Martin Luther King. A real leader it doesn't go in find of consciousness. He mold consensus. So, I'm not just going like supporting everything of President Ranil Wickremesinghe, but he is a person like, doing what ought to do. Though it is hard. And also, I think the government requested IMF report, and this is the first government who published that report. I think it is more than, she would have read it. And based on that, the government is introducing some reforms. Yes, there might be some ups and downs in that, but what is the other way around? Is there any other way?
Yes, there are plenty
No. Let me finish.
Sorry.
So, if there is another way, okay, that has to be approved by the majority of the people. So, that is what we are also hope in the next elections. Whoever proposed these changes, let them come to people and say, this is what I am going to do. So, are you for me or not? That I or her or you can't decide what is the fate of this country. But we can voice. So, any party or existing president or the government or whoever wanted to come to the power, they can come and showcase their ideas. This is how it should go. And IMF, on the other hand, yes, they are providing funds and they have laid down some fiscal policies. These are some conditions you have to adhere. And they have recognized what the government is doing in a proper way. So, if not, they will not approve this millions of external fund facilities, I would say. So, there are some hardships we have to go across. But on the other hand, when she mentioned about the plantation industry, see, from 1992 to today, none of the plantation wage hike was given it for us free. So, the plantation workers along with all the trade unions, CWC was pioneering that cause. We struggled and we went through a lot of hardship to obtain the wage hike. So, it is evidential that the country, now we don't want to put everyone, strangle someone and take anything out of that. We are not in that position. But what we want, what they should to be enjoyed, should be given on the proper manner. So, she may be disagree on the fact that, so none of us can deny the reality. Okay. So, are we going to go on the same path for another 10, 20 years for another generation to be suffer like us? Or are we going to take the hit and make this country better? Is in our hand. So, let us decide on that.
Right. So, I'm afraid we are running out of time. So, it's been a very interesting discussion. My final question to Swasthika. The word Aragalaya came up several times in our discussion. And right now, there's a election campaign in full swing. All the parties are campaigning, a lot of things, negotiations going on. But it's easy for a party to get elected, but it's going to be a lot more difficult to implement policies and bring the country out of this economic mess. Your comments on that?
We have been taught that the economy should be run in a particular way. The IMF tells us one thing, the international creditors tells us another thing. So we have been listening to people outside this country far too long. But one of the things which is very telling about the restructuring is that the entire burden of the restructuring, including the EPF fund, the entire restructuring of the burden of the restructuring has fallen on the working people of this country. There has been other countries in this world. Let's take Argentina for instance. They have not listened to the prescription which has been prescribed by countries which followed the exact opposite prescription in order to develop. US, the European countries is just one example where they follow the exact opposite thing which they are prescribing to us now. I just spoke about capital controls. So what I would urge people in power, what I would not urge people in power, they are not listening to us. What I would urge the people is that there is always another way. You being burdened with depressed wages, you being stolen of your EPF funds is not the only way. And there are internationally, even last week we had a seminar where international economists like Jayati Ghosh, Martin Guzman, these people came and said there is another way, and our government is just going and being good boys to the IMF. Please don't do that, because we are going to go into another crisis. So that is what I would tell the people. You were completely right when you came onto the street and said enough is enough. That is the moment when our younger generation was politicized, and that is the most important thing which we can carry forward from the Aragalaya. That is a permanent politicization of the masses.
And I'm afraid we are out of time in this very interesting discussion. My thanks to Swasthika Arulingam, President of the United Federation of Labour, and Barath Arullsamy, Vice President of the Ceylon Workers' Congress. Thank you very much for spending time with us, and thank you very much to you at home. Have a good night.